Las Vegas, August 28, 1974. The lights burn white hot, the orchestra thunders, and in front of 18,000 people, a tiny figure breaks free from backstage. It's 6-year-old Lisa Marie, running straight toward Elvis in the middle of his song. For a heartbeat, the king stops singing, and the entire arena forgets how to breathe. The velvet curtain quivered under the weight of the brass section warming up. A smell of cologne, hairspray, and anticipation drifted through the hall. The house lights dimmed, and a roar rolled across the room like thunder climbing a mountain. Then, a single blue spotlight. Elvis Presley stepped into it, glittering in his white peacock jumpsuit, cape edges catching every flashbulb. He looked larger than the posters, taller than memory, and yet his eyes, those famous electric blue eyes, seemed almost shy. The orchestra struck the first note of C.C. Rider. "Good evening, Las Vegas," he said, voice warm but trembling slightly. The band kicked in, horns blazing. From the wings, a little girl watched, palms pressed together so tight her knuckles whitened. Lisa Marie Presley, 6 years old, ponytail bouncing, wearing a tiny white dress with silver sequins her nanny had insisted on. She'd heard her daddy sing before, at home, on records, but never like this. Here, he wasn't just daddy. He was something colossal, untouchable, almost mythic. Every seat was filled. Couples leaned forward, whispering his name. Cameras flashed like lightning. And yet, behind that tidal sound, Lisa could hear her own heartbeat. Elvis moved to the edge of the stage, pointing playfully to fans in the front row, tossing silk scarves, laughing between verses. Colonel Tom Parker watched from the sound booth, puffing his cigar, satisfied. Stagehand Joe Esposito whispered to Red West, "Man, he's still got it. Just look at that crowd." But near the left wing, Lisa's nanny tightened her grip on the little girl's shoulder. "Stay back, honey. Daddy's working." Lisa nodded, then took one more step forward anyway. It was 9:42 p.m. when the first surprise happened. Elvis spotted her. Mid-verse, his eyes darted toward the wings. For the briefest moment, his expression softened, almost like a silent hello. The band never noticed. They were deep in rhythm, but Lisa did. She smiled, half hidden behind the curtain. Inside, something stirred in Elvis too. For all his fame, for all the gold records and sold-out nights, this, seeing her, was what made him feel alive. He wasn't the king just then. He was a father remembering what mattered. The song ended in a crash of cymbals. The Hilton Ballroom shook with applause. Elvis lifted his arms, bowed, and flashed that crooked grin. "Thank you very much." From the wings, Lisa clapped harder than anyone. The lights painted stars across her cheeks. She didn't know it yet, but the moment she'd been waiting for was only minutes away. The set list rolled on. Burning Love, Suspicious Minds. The audience was a living thing, shouting, crying, begging for scarves. Security guards lined the stage edge, arms folded, eyes scanning for trouble. Nobody expected danger from a child. How could anyone predict that innocence itself was about to rewrite the night's story? Backstage, a quick exchange crackled over the intercom. "Keep the kid off the floor," someone muttered. But the music was too loud. The warning never reached the nanny. Lisa tugged free of the woman's hand, tiny shoes tapping against the concrete corridor. Her small heart raced in rhythm with the drums she heard echoing through the walls. She peeked again at the glowing stage. Her father twirled, cape spread wide like an angel's wings. To her, it looked like an invitation. B-roll cue, slow-motion crowd cheering, camera zoom to wings. Every legend begins with one step forward. Lisa took hers. The spotlight swung back toward Elvis as he turned for the next verse, unaware of what was moving toward him from the shadows. By the time he noticed, it would be too late to stop the show, and too beautiful to ever forget. Security around the Las Vegas Hilton stage was legendary. No one, not even family, was allowed past the edge during a live set. The risks were too high. One wrong move could ruin a performance broadcast to the world. But that night, Rules didn't matter to a 6-year-old with her heart wide open. Lisa Marie waited for the loudest cheer to fade. Her father had just tossed another scarf into the crowd. Fans screamed his name, hands reaching for him as if touching Elvis meant touching magic itself. From her angle behind the curtain, she saw him laugh, the way only he laughed at home. That smile, that sound, it was too much for her to stay hidden any longer. She slipped away from her nanny, sliding between two stagehands arguing over a mic cable. Her little shoes tapped the hallway floor. She followed the pulse of the bass until it shook through her chest. The stage was glowing, a golden doorway to her father. Red West, one of Elvis's most trusted bodyguards, spotted her too late. Hey, where's she going?" he shouted, dropping his headset. But Lisa had already taken off, a streak of white lace under the blinding lights. At first, the crowd thought it was part of the act, a small figure running toward the king as he sang "Can't Help Falling in Love." Then came the murmur, a ripple spreading through 18,000 people as realization hit. "That's his little girl," someone yelled. The orchestra faltered. Elvis turned. In that single breath, everything froze. The brass held their notes. The drummer lifted his sticks mid-air. Elvis blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. He saw her, hair catching the spotlight, eyes wide with trust. And the entire world narrowed to just one thing: his child running to him. No fan, no camera, no applause could compete with that moment. Colonel Parker shouted from the side, "Get her off the stage!" His cigar hit the floor. But Elvis didn't move. Not away, at least. Lisa stumbled once, caught herself, and kept running. She reached the steps, her tiny hands gripping the metal rail. Security rushed forward, but Elvis raised a single hand, palm out, a silent command. "Let her come," he said. The crowd went silent. You could hear the creak of the stage floor as she climbed the final step. Elvis knelt, cape sweeping the ground like a white wing, and opened his arms. For a heartbeat, the noise vanished. No one moved. Then she leapt into his embrace. Gasps turned into cheers, then tears. Reporters later wrote they had never seen the Hilton crowd cry like that. Some fans clasped hands, others whispered prayers. In that second, Elvis Presley, the untouchable superstar, became every father in the world. Why do the purest moments often happen when no one plans them? And what happens when a man loved by millions remembers what it means to love just one? The music faded. Elvis didn't let her go. He whispered something no mic could catch. The conductor looked to the band for direction. But they were frozen too, eyes wet. Colonel Parker turned away, muttering, "This wasn't on the schedule." But maybe that's why it mattered. When Elvis finally stood, he lifted her with him, her tiny arms around his neck. The spotlight chased them both as he carried her to the center of the stage. Fans leaned forward, drawn by something even rarer than a live concert: vulnerability. Lisa pressed her cheek against his. "Hi, Daddy." And for once, he forgot the cameras, the critics, the contracts. What he said next, and what he did next, would turn this unplanned interruption into one of the most beloved moments in music history. For a long heartbeat, nobody knew what to do. The lights hung still, the brass section waiting for a cue that never came. 18,000 people watched the king of rock and roll freeze mid-song, holding his daughter in his arms. Red West whispered into his headset, "Colonel, do we pull her off?" "Don't you dare touch her," came the reply. Not from Parker this time, but from Elvis himself. He looked down at Lisa, her hands gripping his collar like it was the only safe place in the world. In that second, the performer vanished. Only a father remained. He took the mic from the stand, voice shaking just slightly. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," he began, smile curving into something raw. "Seems I've got a special guest tonight." Laughter rippled through the crowd, soft and uncertain. Then he knelt, the king of Vegas, kneeling before a 6-year-old child. The orchestra followed his motion instinctively, lowering their instruments. The spotlight narrowed until the rest of the stage disappeared. All that remained was the glow around father and daughter. Elvis brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You want to sing with Daddy?" he whispered, the mic catching just enough of the words for the front row to hear. Lisa hesitated, then nodded. From somewhere backstage, a voice shouted, "Key of C!" The pianist Glenn Hardin tapped the first trembling notes of Love Me Tender. The room fell completely still. Not a glass clinked, not a chair moved. Elvis began the verse softly, eyes never leaving Lisa's face. "Love me tender, love me sweet." His voice cracked halfway through the line, but the imperfection only made it more beautiful. Lisa, barely audible, echoed a few words, her pitch small and pure. A woman in the third row pressed her hands to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Every flashbulb seemed to hesitate before daring to go off. What makes a legend stop chasing applause and start protecting silence? And why does that silence feel louder than any standing ovation? By the time the song ended, tears streaked through Elvis's mascara. He kissed Lisa's forehead, stood slowly, and looked over the crowd. "You see," he said softly, "that's what love looks like." Thunder erupted. Cheers, sobs, applause colliding into one impossible noise. The moment had broken every rule of performance, yet somehow made the show immortal. As the curtains trembled behind them, no one knew it yet, but this unscripted duet would echo for decades, long after the king was gone. The air inside the Hilton showroom turned heavy, like everyone was afraid to breathe too loud. Elvis still held Lisa's hand, small, trembling, wrapped around his finger like it was the last safe thing on earth. The band, still stunned, looked to him for guidance. He gave them none. He just smiled, nodded to his daughter, and whispered, "One more time, baby." The lights dimmed to a pale gold. Then it began. "Love Me Tender," from the very top. This time, the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't scream. They listened. 18,000 people, silent as a chapel. The only sound was Elvis's voice, low and fragile, floating across the room. Lisa stood next to him, barely reaching his hip, her dress catching light like scattered stars. Each time he sang a line, she mimicked the last word. Quiet, unsure, but brave. "Love me tender, tender." And just like that, the impossible happened. A man once seen as untouchable became human before their eyes. The king had laid down his crown, not in defeat, but in love. From the back rows, fans held hands. Some prayed, others cried. Even the casino floor downstairs had gone eerily quiet. Workers later said you could hear the echo through the vents. At the piano, Glenn Hardin wiped a tear with his sleeve, but kept playing. Guitarist James Burton whispered to Charlie Hodge, "We're playing history, man." The cameras, old, grainy VHS reels, captured only fragments, but those fragments would outlive the night. When Elvis hit the final verse, he turned the mic toward Lisa. She froze for half a second. Then, a tiny breathy note. The room erupted. You could feel hearts breaking and healing all at once. Fans stood up in waves, shouting her name, clapping through tears. Elvis just laughed softly and kissed the top of her head. What's stronger, talent or tenderness? And when history remembers legends, do they ever remember the love behind the spotlight? He bowed with her in his arms, whispering, "You did good, honey. You did real good." Then he whispered into the mic, "That one was for you, darling." A wave of applause crashed like surf on a shore, endless, raw, overwhelming. Colonel Parker, watching from the sound booth, shook his head and muttered, "He just rewrote the rule book again." He didn't know it yet, but he was right. That song, that moment, would outlive every contract, every hit single, every rumor. When the curtain finally dropped, Elvis carried Lisa off stage in his arms. The crowd stayed standing, still applauding even as the orchestra stopped. And somewhere in that echo, caught on cheap cassette recorders and remembered for generations, the king had given his greatest gift. Proof that love, when shown openly, can stop the world. But backstage, away from the flashbulbs, the real story, the quiet one, was just beginning. The curtain hadn't even closed before the noise began. a roar that rolled through the Hilton like thunder trapped inside a cathedral. It wasn't applause anymore. It was gratitude, disbelief, love, all colliding in one unstoppable wave. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously. "Elvis halts concert for daughter," one of them muttered, unable to look away. Even the showgirls waiting for the next act stood frozen, mascara streaking down their cheeks. Elvis emerged again for a bow, Lisa's hand still in his. The spotlight split in two. One beam for the king, one for the little princess. The crowd of 18,000 began chanting, first softly, then louder. "Lisa! Lisa! Lisa!" She looked terrified at first, clutching his leg, but Elvis knelt beside her, grinning. "It's all right, baby," he whispered, Mike catching the tremor in his voice. "They just love you, that's all." From the wings, Colonel Parker pressed his hat to his chest. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered to Red West. "The toughest crowd in Vegas, and she's the one who tamed 'em." Somewhere between those tears and cheers, the world remembered that even kings have hearts that beat like everyone else's. The next morning, the Las Vegas Review-Journal ran the headline, "Elvis and Daughter Melt Vegas Crowd." Bootleg cassette tapes of the performance spread like wildfire, traded hand to hand in smoky record shops. People said you could hear it. The moment he bent down, the way his voice cracked, the silence before the cheer. Fan letters flooded Graceland. Mothers wrote about watching with their children. Fathers confessed it made them cry. One line appeared again and again. "We saw a man love his child more than fame." Why does it move us so deeply to see power made gentle, and why do we never forget it when it happens? That night, even the orchestra members couldn't sleep. James Burton later recalled, "We played hundreds of shows, but that one felt like church." Lisa fell asleep in Elvis's arms before they even reached the limo. He carried her through the hotel corridor, still in his stage suit, sequins glinting beneath the flicker of fluorescent light. Fans who lingered outside watched quietly. No screaming, no pushing, just reverent silence as the doors closed behind him. Elvis turned once more toward the stage lights through the narrow gap before the doors shut. His eyes glistened. He whispered to himself, "Now that's what matters." But behind that tender smile, another truth waited. A private promise he made that night, one he intended to keep forever. Backstage smelled of sweat, hairspray, and victory. Technicians still buzzed from what they'd seen. The air felt thick, part disbelief, part sacred. The crowd's cheers could still be heard, muffled through the concrete walls. Elvis carried Lisa down the hallway, her head resting on his shoulder, her small fingers tangled in the sequins on his collar. Security stood aside silently. No one dared interrupt. The king wasn't a performer now. He was a father carrying his child home. He entered his dressing room and gently set her down on the vanity counter. The mirror lights glowed around her reflection. A little girl with sleepy eyes and glitter on her cheeks. Elvis leaned against the counter beside her, breathing heavy from the show, but smiling. "Well, sweetheart," he said, voice gravelly but warm, "you just stole your daddy's show." Lisa giggled, swinging her legs. "Did I do bad?" He shook his head, kneeling so they were eye level. "No, honey, you did perfect. You reminded me what this is all for." For a moment silence hung between them, the kind that feels alive, full of words too big to say. Then he reached into a drawer, pulled out one of the silk scarves he'd thrown to the audience earlier, and tied it gently around her wrist. "Keep this," he said. "That way, even when I'm gone, you'll know your daddy's always close." It wasn't just a scarf. It was a promise stitched in silk. From the doorway, Joe Esposito watched quietly, wiping his eyes. "Never seen him like that," he whispered to a cameraman. "Not in all these years," Lisa yawned. Elvis smiled faintly and lifted her again, humming the same tune they'd just sung together. He carried her to the small sofa and tucked her under a blue blanket. "Daddy?" she murmured. "Yeah, baby?" "Do the lights ever get scary?" He paused. Sometimes they do. But they're only bright because you belong in them. Can love really shield someone from the world waiting outside those stage doors? And when fame fades, does the warmth of that love stay burning? The hallway lights dimmed as the crew packed up. Outside, the city glowed neon and loud, 1,000 strangers still buzzing about what they'd just witnessed. But in that quiet room, time stopped. Elvis sat beside her until she fell asleep. Colonel Parker peeked in, whispered, "Elvis, we've got reporters waiting." Elvis didn't move. He just said softly, "They can wait." "She can't." He kissed her forehead, whispered, "Good night, my girl," and stood to leave for a midnight rehearsal. Before he closed the door, Lisa stirred, eyes half open. "Sing to me again, Daddy." And so he did, low and tender, until even the walls seemed to sigh with him. That lullaby would be the last song she ever heard her father sing off stage. When Elvis Presley passed away on August 16, 1977, the world seemed to lose its soundtrack. Crowds lined the gates of Graceland, clutching candles, flowers, and fading photographs. But among the endless tributes and headlines, one story returned again and again. The night he stopped his own show for a 6-year-old girl in white. That girl was now a young woman. Lisa Marie Presley watched the old footage in silence, sitting in a dark living room in Los Angeles. The grainy Super 8 film flickered, her tiny self running toward the brightest light in the world. The image trembled, but the sound, even through hiss and static, was unmistakable. Her father's voice, breaking just before the word tender. People still sent letters to her, decades after that night. "I was in the audience," one wrote. "When he knelt down for you, we all felt something change inside us." Another simply said, "Thank you for reminding us he was human." Lisa never replied to most of them. She didn't need to. That moment belonged to everyone who saw it, and to the millions who wished they had. In the late 90s, a small plaque was installed at Graceland, tucked beneath a framed photo from that concert. The engraving read, "Wherever you go, my little one, my heart goes too." EP tourists touched it like a relic. Some cried. Others just stood in silence. The sound of his voice still drifted from the speakers nearby, singing the same song that had once stopped the world. Even in death, his music carried the echo of that single night, the sound of love louder than fame. In interviews, Lisa spoke little about her father's legend, but once, in a quiet moment, she said, "I don't remember much of the crowd. I just remember feeling safe in his arms. That's what I kept." Isn't that what we all search for? One moment that reminds us we're seen, we're safe, we're loved. And when the music fades, is that memory what truly keeps us alive? Archivists at Graceland still replay the concert tape each year on his birthday. The crowd noise, the laughter, the final applause, all preserved on that fragile reel. Visitors gather in the viewing room, watching father and daughter frozen in golden light. One fan whispered once, "That's not just history, that's hope." Time, it seemed, couldn't erase tenderness. The night the king knelt before his little girl became more than a performance. It became a story the world kept retelling. A reminder that even legends leave behind lullabies. And years later, when Lisa herself would stand before her own audience, that echo, his echo, would rise again. Years later, under a gentler spotlight, Lisa Marie Presley stood on her own stage. Different venue, different time, but before the first note, she paused. Just like he used to. That moment of stillness wasn't hesitation, it was memory. The silence before her voice carried the weight of a promise once whispered in a backstage dressing room. The lights are only bright because you belong in them. As she began to sing, an old photo of her and her father was projected behind her. The image from that Las Vegas night. A father kneeling before his daughter, love immortalized under a blinding glow. The crowd didn't just hear the song, they felt the echo, a reminder of the night when love overpowered fame. Legends fade. Love doesn't. People cheered, some crying without knowing why. It wasn't about nostalgia, it was about connection. about something unspoken that binds hearts across generations. In that single pause before her first lyric, every fan heard the ghost of that 1974 stage, the gasp, the applause, the tenderness that melted millions of hearts. When the lights dim for good, what really remains? The music, the fame, or the way we made someone feel safe in our arms? Lisa smiled through her final verse, eyes glistening. As she left the stage, she whispered softly, not to the crowd, but to the photograph still glowing behind her. "Thank you, Daddy." And so, what began as an interruption on a Las Vegas stage became something far greater, a lesson sung across decades. Elvis didn't just leave behind music. He left behind proof that kindness, shown in a moment of instinct, can outlast eternity. The king was gone, the legend remained, but the love, that never left. If this moment touched you, share it, because somewhere out there, another child still needs to see that love can outshine fame, noise, and time itself. Legends fade, but compassion echoes forever. Keep the story alive. Let it remind the world that even kings kneel when love calls their name.